Hey, it's James Phillips. I want to tell you a story about when I was enlisted and when we were in Desert Storm. So I was coming out of Fort Bragg at that time and basically had been on what's called the Assault Command Post for our division level element. And as we were overseas, we had basically waited over there from August all the way until January when they started the overhead bombing. We got ready, and where we were up is where King Fahd on the upper part of the assault in the northern part of Iraq, where we were coming in through over the berm, and as the war started, we rolled up over the berm, and as we're coming in, we began to go through and take prisoners and all this other stuff as we were going through. But we had a lieutenant colonel who was running our assault command post and was in charge of all of us. There was probably about 100 of us together in a multiple number of vehicles, and the guy that was running in my vehicle and was in charge of my section was Sergeant First Class Smith. And Sergeant First Class Smith was a Vietnam veteran, old school, was not his first time in combat, and he had been in 3 tours in Vietnam and probably had about 24 to 26 years in, old grizzled guy. And long story short, as we're running up through Iraq, as things are going off and you're having the overhead attacks, you've got basically the Iraqis are coming in, surrendering in droves. We come upon a place where there is berms around and everybody had left. There had been an Iraqi battalion in there and they were protecting themselves, and they had ended up getting shot out of that by there being multi-launch rocket systems that drop little bombs all over them. It's called MLRS. And so the problem with MLRS is it leaves unexploded munitions because not every little bomb goes off. And it sits there. And so as we were going up, this lieutenant colonel, who was our commander, basically says, you guys are all going to go in there, and you're going to go in there and you can kind of sweep it a little bit and make sure you're not going to get any of these bombs, but you're going to set up in this area and you're going to basically bed down for the night and potentially even for a day or two as we begin to run our commo and our assault command posts and all this other stuff. So Sergeant First Class Smith, who was the Vietnam vet, he looks at Lieutenant Colonel and he basically tells him, that's not happening. We're not doing that. This is stupid. I'm not going to follow this order. Not going to happen. So they get into a fight right there in front of everybody. And the Lieutenant Colonel basically says, if you don't go down there and do what I tell you to do, Sergeant First Class Smith, I'm going to court-martial you. Sergeant First Class Smith says, you got to do what you got to do, but I'm not killing my guys. And so Sergeant First Class Smith was known within our brigade and our larger element. And so he basically called the division level commander and let him know that we had a serious incident report that this senior NCO had refused to follow an order. So about a couple hours later, we have a helicopter come in, and it's the chief of staff, and he's there, and he basically comes in and looks at the situation. He was also a Vietnam vet that was also enlisted. So he comes in and he basically lands his helicopter, not knowing really what was going on, and puts it down within this MLRS unexploded munition area. And as he comes out and he goes and talks to Lieutenant Colonel, he ends up kind of getting into him and starts hearing the story and never even came over to Sergeant First Class Smith, because what he basically said was, you didn't listen to the voice that was telling you that you were putting people in danger, and you let me land here with my helicopter where I could be blown up just like everybody else. And he said, you're fired. And you're fired for not listening, and you cannot be a leader, and you will not be a leader for us. And then the colonel went over, chief of staff, talked to Sergeant First Class Smith and said, you are now in charge of security, and you're responsible for making sure that nobody here gets killed, because if anybody dies on my watch here, I'm now going to blame you. And Sergeant First Class Smith said, yes, sir, took over, no casualties for the rest of the war. Thank you.